Good morning, people. Welcome to the Rangers Review Morning Briefing. It is Thursday, the 5th of December. I'm Derek Clark, and to discuss last night's thumping win over Kilmarnock and look ahead to today's AGM, Joshua Barry joins me. How's it going, Joshua?
Good. First time in a while that we've been on to discuss our Rangers' emphatic domestic performance. So yeah, lots to get into. Good timing for the Rangers board to have that performance ahead of the AGM. Still a lot of talking points. Chris is going to be at that, so we'll get into a little bit of that talk today. But yeah, I think plenty to discuss from that performance last night. First and foremost.
Yeah, it was most welcome, you've got to say. I did want to see a Rangers performance that entertained the fans, that pitched up to Ibrox on a real wintry night last night, and they certainly got their money's worth. About time too. So yeah, delighted with that. Rangers running out 6-0 victors over Kilmarnock. First half goal from James Tavernier. Danilo netted in the second half. Two brilliant assists from Yanis Hadji. Václav Černý got in on the act with a well-taken strike. Hamza Igaman scored a belter, and Cyril Dessers came off the bench to add 2 goals to his tally as well. Rangers were superb. Kilmarnock were poor. Let's not beat about the bush. Derek McInnes has a real job on his hands sorting them out, because they are at bottom end of the table and really struggling for form. But take nothing away from Rangers, who were brilliant. Really enjoyed watching the front four, if you like, Joshua, that the Hadji, Černý, Igaman and Danilo liked the movement. That being said, the man of the match award went to Nico Raskin, and I think that was well deserved for the Belgian as well. I thought he was superb in the middle of the park. You wanted a Diamandi and Raskin partnership, and you got your wish last night. Almost got your team selection bang on, but Jefte obviously got the nod over Ridvan at left back. But you were there last night. What did you make of it all?
Yeah, well, I think we've got a couple of graphics from the game which I think tell the story of it quite well. But before we get into that, it was totally different to the rest of the season. Clement wanted sexy football, didn't they? He said that the day before. I see you went with, what did you say, sexy football?
Sexy football, yeah. The first person I remember saying that was Ruud Gullit back in the day. I think let us know in the comments, folks, but I think was when he took over as Chelsea boss at the time, he was looking to make Chelsea better on the eye, if you like, and I'm sure he came out with the phrase "sexy football." But let us know if I'm wrong on that one. But yeah, carry on, Joshua.
Yeah, no, and it was a lot different. I think that the team selection was reflective of the type of game that Rangers need to play domestically. Too often this season, writing a piece that we're putting out on the website shortly, Rangers have been, their attacks been predictable and one-dimensional. If you think back to the start of the season when you had, Cyril Dessers and Tom Lawrence as your starting two, and not much to bring off the bench, wins have normally been edged. It was only the third time last night that the Rangers have had more than a 1-goal margin when they've won in the Scottish Premiership. And last night was just a total break from that. The players seemed like they looked to be enjoying it. For me, the biggest difference was you had a midfield that we've seen Diomande and Raskin and Barron together on enough occasions. It doesn't give you enough going forward domestically. Rangers played 2 strikers last night, and I think that's the big difference, Derek. You've also got competition, and that's what Clement said in his press conference. And I think, to give him his due, that's something that we've probably not discussed enough. Now, does last night change the whole course of the season? Does it change the fact that I still think he's been too guilty of putting square pegs in round holes too often? No, but the difference last night is you can bring Barami and Dessers on when the game's at 4-0, and they, Barami helps create the 5th goal. You could bring Ridvan on for Jefte. You can bring Hadji off and Barami on, as mentioned. Danilo and Igaman off, Dessers on. And because you had 3 strikers, you could afford to play 2 from the start. That was a big difference for me. It was a fluid front four, which I think was somewhat in response to Kilmarnock's man marking. But it was really interesting listening to Derek McInnes in his press conference after the game. People can watch that on the YouTube channel. He spoke about his team being a bit spooked by Rangers' movement, in particular because they were man marking. And you saw Igaman started as a number 9, but often rotated out to the left wing. Hadji started as the left winger, but often rotated into the number 10 spot, and Danilo pushed up one. And McInnes said that spooked us a little bit. When the game went, I think 4-0, we tried to flood the middle a little bit more. But then for the latter 2 goals, Rangers just started to go around them. And the latter 2 goals came from crosses as well. I don't think we've spoken about a Rangers performance domestically. While we need to remember this is only one game, but I don't think we've spoken about a Rangers performance domestically where they've carried that level of threat kind of across the board, whether you're talking about the variation of the front four from the start or the changes that Clement could make as well. So the bench definitely helped. The variety, and the depth that the squad had. For me, it was about playing 2 strikers instead of 3 midfielders, none of whom are necessarily that creative, and a lot of good individual performances as well. Because as you say, I think Raskin, the fact if your holding midfielder gets the man of the match when you win 6-0 at home, that probably tells you how well he's playing at the moment. And I think Raskin is playing his best football since that run when he first came to the club at the start of 2023.
Yeah, absolutely. Adam gets in touch. He says, bit of a landslide last night, using the old David Brent reference there. Yeah, absolutely was a landslide last night, that's for sure. This is what Philip Clement had to say about it.
The football that I want to see and what we spoke about the last week and the last months, that it's about timing, the right runs, the right passes to get these connections on the pitch, to gel together with a lot of new players. If you see how many new players were on the pitch today also. So that the players get the reward also what they've been doing in the trainings and in the games. I don't think in the last 2 league games they were rewarded in that way because we had also good chances. But today you finish it off, not all the time because it could have been more, and like this, you see the potential and the way this team can play and open up teams who want to make a low block and men marking all over the pitch. I think they give a good example how we can be lethal in that way.
Yep, that's what the manager had to say about that. Since the Dundee United draw, Joshua, Rangers have obviously won 3 matches in a row, 2 in the league, 1 in Europe. They've racked up 11 goals, conceding 1. That's much more like it, isn't it?
Yeah, and the St Johnstone performance, I still think it was one of these. I think Stevie spoke about it in his column. It's one of these 1-0 performances that at the time, because Rangers had still only scored 18 or 19 goals in the league, and it wasn't. It was kind of the trend of the season so far, where they didn't create that many opportunities. They spent more time in the opposition's half, but if you took away that late Danilo chance that would have been called back for a foul that he committed on the defender when he ran through on goal, then their chance creation would have still been pretty low. Last night was the highest XG Rangers have had in the all season, apart from the Ross County game. 3.41. Kilmarnock obviously created 0.03. I think they had 1 attempt on target. That's pretty convincing. Now, not every single home performance is going to look like that, Derek, but I think part of Clement's issue this season is he's been speaking about a football that people haven't been seeing, and he's been referencing ideas that haven't been coming out on the pitch. And last night was clearly a very satisfying night for him because he could see, I think in particular with those latter 2 goals and the speed at which Rangers moved through the park, we've not really seen that over the whole duration of the season. And as I mentioned, I think the difference in having a couple of runners always going ahead of the ball, Igaman and Danilo linked up really well for the time that they were on the park. Cherney continues to score goals. Don't know what his record is now, but it's pretty good altogether. And if we look at the pass network, I actually think while it wasn't as if Clement chose a totally different formation last night, there was a few different tweaks because recently what we've seen, Derek, is this is just charting average passing positions. Apologies for people who are watching, but they can go into the Rangers review and have a look at the pass network. What we've seen more often than not this season is actually Rangers have went back to like a 4-1-4-1 because Raskin's played. So it's been a number 6 Raskin behind 2 midfielders, Barron and Diamande as the number 8. It was Hadji in that left side of the number 8 position at the weekend. And what they did last night was they effectively played it was a 4-2-3-1, 4-2-4, call it what you want, but it was 2 strikers up top. Now they were changing positions, they were getting the ball in different areas, but they were liberated to go and attack in front of a midfield 2 as opposed to a midfield 3. Hadji playing off the left, but Chefty was really, really high. And I think the fact that he was playing next to Balogun and not proper maybe gave him a little bit more autonomy to go forward as well, because Balogun was more comfortable defending that big space. So I think there was a bit of a tactical tweak last night as well, where we saw Rangers at the start of the season go back to kind of that midfield 3. because they were being played through quite easily, and that was definitely a theme at the start of the season. Last night, I think because of the legs they had in certain positions, the desire to get two strikers in there, two creative profiles behind them, and two fullbacks who got pretty high as well, because Chefty obviously created the fifth goal with a brilliant cross, and we've not seen that final ball from him that often. I think it might be his first assist of the season, and then James Tavernier obviously scored his first league goal of the season, and then also created Desser's second goal to get the sixth goal on the night. So it just felt like too often this season, without trying to be too simplistic about it, but too often this season you've looked at a Rangers starting 11 from the first whistle. Dundee United at home recently is a perfect example, and you've thought, does that have the variety, the tools, the number of forward runners, the number of goals in that team to break down a defensive block? And I think too often the answer has been no. Whereas last night, if you're looking at that starting 11, there was just a lot more options, and that was definitely reflected in the number of goals Rangers scored, but the number of different goals they scored as well.
Yeah, the manager was asked in his press conference about the team selection setting the tone. Rangers were on the front foot. This is what he had to say. Yes, but how many times in this 1 year did I have two strikers available in the squad? That's the reality of the story also. So it's major. It's important to keep everybody fit. And you say now the right choices. But I'm sure if we didn't win with 6-0, that maybe you'd have said, why is Connor Barron not starting today? It's like that. But all these players are pushing. They're working hard. I cannot say anything about that. We need to keep it that way. And then they'll all have their moments to shine. They will all have their moments to also to sit on the bench and to be ready for the next game, because it's such an ultra marathon this season that we need this rotation and smart rotation in the squad. And that's what we're going to do in the next weeks and the next month. So I'm sure maybe you're going to be the first one, if you don't win the game, to say, why isn't he not playing? But that's easy after the game of hindsight. So that's the difficulty about this job. So interesting point referencing that he's not had really two strikers available. Danilo just coming back from injury. That was his first match he had started, and was it over a year, I think, in the league that he had started? I'm not entirely sure, but good to see him getting on the score sheet. And Hamza Igaman continues to shine. Thought he be a bit rash in his finishing.
Yeah, you were criticising him in the group chat in the first half, and was that for a miss?
Well, not that. I was criticising John Suter's miss for me, the corner that I thought Rangers were going to score a corner. I nearly fell off my seat watching that, but somehow he managed to. I know the ball's slightly behind him, but he has to hit the target for me.
Yes,
that chance early on. Hamza for me has to hit the target with his chance early on. Was close with the curling effort. There's a ball that was curled into him, and it sort of just struck off his head. But he took his goal really well in the second half, and his first league domestic goal, of course, as well. All his goals have came in Europe. But I'm really enjoying seeing Hamza Igaman Joshua, and as the manager said there, playing two strikers. It ties in with a comment that caught my eye here from Day in the Life. Says, do you think PC will keep two up front, lads? I think that is the way forward, is it not?
I think definitely, if you're looking at the type of profiles he needs in his starting 11, it's just such a far cry from if you last night, if you have, say, let's say for argument's sake, you start with Dessers and Lawrence and Bayrami, and I think Bayrami coming on that number 10 position looked more comfortable, and you'd hope he gets some more minutes there. But that front three, there was just it was a lot of variety is the word that comes to mind, because you've got someone like Hadji who can play off his left foot or his right foot, creates the first two goals, and he creates one in his right foot with that cross, and he partially earns, I think, the room for that cross, because there's the threat of, is he going to go on, but you don't know which side he's going to go on. And then the second goal, he creates it with his left foot. Igaman and Danilo can go beyond or come short, whereas Dessers is a player who always wants to run beyond. So I think it's about the profile of player you have in the team and the goal threat as well, which Rangers did have last night. So certainly in games they're going to dominate. Is that going to be the starting 11 against Spurs? I don't think so. I think that's a game where you probably have to lock up the midfield a little bit more.
Yeah, and Hadji can't play, which is annoying.
Exactly. Yeah, and the competition that Clement references, that probably shouldn't be overshadowed as well, because a point that he's made, and again maybe this has been overshadowed slightly, is that a point I think he's been trying to make is that late on in games, Rangers haven't had the option of turning to someone from the bench who maybe pads out the score a little bit and makes it look better. They've had to edge games. I still don't think he's used his squad, perfectly, and that's not to suggest so, but that competition will help him. And Igaman, he's just fun to watch, Derek, isn't he? I mean, that chance where he put the ball just over the bar, almost went into the top corner. The way he used his body to create that opportunity. And all throughout the night, he was really difficult for Kilmarnock to defend. Has he got rough parts to his game? Yes, but I think what he gives you in response far supersedes that. And you know, we told the story last week, and it was a really nice feature on how he's settling into life in Glasgow that was put out yesterday by the club. And we told the story last week of how Egeman was signed and the changes in Rangers recruitment, which have been spoken a lot about, and maybe it's taken a little bit of time to see the product of that. But if you look at the likes of Chefty and Egeman last night, they're definitely reflective of that. That's the profile of player Rangers brought Niels Coppen into the club to try and identify. And Egeman is someone who they got for a relatively low fee compared to, you know, what you're paying elsewhere in world football. He initially came up in a data search, and people can read the piece, which is on the homepage of the website. But it speaks to a different approach, how Rangers are trying to look into different markets. A year ago, they weren't going to the Moroccan league to find a player like Hamza Egeman. And while it's still early days in his Rangers career, I think you can see that in a year's time, in particular, when he does refine certain edges to his game, he'll be a really good player because he has all the tools. And last night, I think suited him, Derek, because he's not a number 9 who wants to stay stationary and only occupy that kind of central spot. He wants to move to the sides, and that's been a feature of his game so far. But because last night he had Hadji moving in field, he had Danilo jumping up from the number 10 spot and players he could combine with, that suited him pretty well. So keep him in. I think will he start at home against Tottenham? Maybe not. But if you're looking ahead to that game against Celtic a week on Sunday, I think the likes of Hamza Egeman should be starting. Yes, they maybe are still learning elements of the game, but as I said at the start of the answer, I think he gives you much more than he takes away from the team at the moment. I don't know what you think on that.
I'd be starting him against Tottenham. It's going to be him or Dessers, obviously, so I'd be taking him, even though he scored 2 goals last night. I think that's, he's top goal scorer for Rangers, Cyril Dessers, but some comments saying he's third choice striker, which is quite something.
Yeah, but that's the point. I've just asked you for your answer. I've jumped in, but that is a fair point. That I think you think back to that Dundee United game where Egeman came on and 1-0 away from home, and I remember we put a piece out after that. It was basically trying to argue that Dessers is not a striker for all occasions. He's had to be because Clement hasn't. Now, I think Clement's team selection shouldn't be totally let off the hook, because at points, especially towards the tail end of last season, I think a lot of those decisions to try and cram players into into a system, I think that really harmed Rangers' title chances if you're thinking about Ross County away in particular. But this season, it is a fair comment that he made last night that when you do only have Dessers as your fit starting central striker, and even when you have Egeman off the bench, you probably can't start him as well, because you then don't have a striker to bring on, and you risk injury a little bit more. And I don't think Egeman plays as well. Dessers is a different type of player to Danilo, isn't he? So if you take Dessers out that team, he's going to suit certain occasions. He scored two of the coolest finishes he's had at the club last night. But I don't think we've seen Derek. He's not the player who should be playing away at Parkhead. He's not the player who should be playing every single game when you need the striker up top to link play. And if those two players, Danilo and Egeman, are back, then suddenly the forward line looks a lot better. And suddenly I think the options, the way Clement can play changes, because he has strikers who can then bring others into play as well.
Yeah. James with the point says Dessers against Spurs, but they have Egeman and Danilo in the final. Of course, that League Cup final just a few days after the Tottenham game. There's a few other points I wanted to flag up. Ian says, what was the crowd last night? Just over 44,000, I think it was, if I'm not
officially
mistaken. Yeah. Wasn't the best of crowds, Joshua?
Nah, and you can understand it, because the games at Ibrox haven't been the best either, and it was a pretty horrible night as well. So I think that was the official attendance. I don't know what the actual was. I'd expect it will be full against Spurs, and it's interesting to see what Rangers do now going away to Ross County, and how much rotation there is in the starting 11, because there was feel-good factor leaving Ibrox last night for people. That is the first time that's happened, aside from a European night. That's the first time that's maybe happened all season. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Apart from the Bucharest game. So is it going to be a turning point? Don't know. Can Rangers use it to go into next week? Potentially, but it was certainly an example of what Clement has spoken about. So often I think there's been a disconnect between the type of football he's been discussing and the product on the park. And last night I think he could point to, this is what I'm trying to do. Give me the squad to do it. And we need to see what happens next, because it is at the end of the day, it's only one game, isn't it?
Absolutely. Jack, just highlighting that point, it says, I almost forgot what it was like to enjoy watching Rangers. Hopefully last night's performance will continue. Another player as well, we touched on it there, Joshua, is Yanis Hadji. Homer with a point says, Hadji gets the midfield moving. His distribution to the forward players is what we've been missing. Oh, how I just wish Rangers had managed to sort out the situation with Yanis in the summer. Rangers could have been doing with him from the start of the season, Joshua. He's a quality player. He's showing it right now. I said to Chris when we were on last night about Yanis, he says he's be some games where it won't suit him. For me, he's in the team every week. Domestically, of course, he's not in the European squad, but Rangers need him right now.
Yeah, I think you've got to give him a lot of credit, because he created those two before the game became that kind of free scoring game that eventually did. It was Hadji who created the first two goals, and the first goal in particular, it's a pass that probably no one else in that team sees or plays or can pull off. And yeah, I agree with you. Obviously, it's a long story. The club trying to get players out of the building this summer. Hadji himself speaking publicly about the possibility of that before the Euros. I think he's a player. It was interesting when he had created that first goal last night. Almost as many Rangers players ran to him as they did to Tavernier, and I don't think that's a slight on Tavernier, who's really good last night. But it kind of felt like it was his moment back at Ibrox. He was in front of the main stand. He's had, what's easy to forget in the last few years, is he's had, really since he injured himself against Stirling Albion, and obviously we did an interview with him the following year where he told us about the kind of story of that injury layoff. But that kind of wasn't the end of it, if you like. He's not played consistent football, apart from for his national team, who I think he's near 50 caps for. He's not played consistent football since that moment in early January, and it must be incredibly frustrating for a player who is now 26, is kind of in the prime of their career. You know the weight that Hadji has on his shoulders because of the name that's on the back of his shirt. But he's a player that I think when you're watching games, fans have a connection with, because he speaks well and seems to understand the responsibility that he has when he plays for a club like Rangers, and he's quite comfortable. I think what stands out to me, Derek, is Cherney fits into this bracket for me too, but he's comfortable taking that responsibility on. Isn't someone who shirks responsibility, passes sideways. He tries things, and that was the difference between Rangers getting 3 points up in Perth, because I think it was a game where an individual moment or an own goal or a mistake was going to decide that game. And now he's probably competing for that attacking midfield spot with Nadim Barami, who came off the bench and played a good part in the creation of the fifth goal. I agree with you at this moment in time. Is he going to start in the League Cup final? You're tempted to say that Rangers should go for... Yeah, I don't know. You're tempted to say they should go for a more industrious midfield. But again, the difference in actually having profiles who, as the Homer said in the comments, who can play forward, who can break lines, who probably improve other people around them. And they're just different. Again, it's so often that midfield's been so samey throughout the course of this season. So I agree with you. I think he stays in there at the moment, and suddenly that improves the rest of the team, because you've got Barami competing for that spot. You've got a player like Hadji who probably, while not faultless, does improve others around him, and is someone who will take a bit of ownership and responsibility too. So one of the many narratives in this season, because for a long time it looked like he would be leaving the club. Clement spoke publicly about that too, but he's glad to have him now, isn't he?
Absolutely. This is an interesting point. I've seen this last night. I mean, the team, it was on social media, leaked yesterday morning. Chaparuni says, what's happening? Team has been leaked before matches. Are they investigating? It happened to Celtic recently as well. I know Brendan Rodgers was quizzed on this after a game recently, and he says he called out said person that is providing the team sheet before it is announced. I wouldn't like to think that someone within the compound of Auchenhowie and Ibrox is doing that, because it is not helping the team, aids the opposition, you'd imagine, if the teams have been leaked prior to the team lines coming out. But you don't want that happening, Joshua.
No, it's not me, because I got one wrong.
Nobody's leaking the team to us, that's for sure. I wish they would, so we get some of Clement's teams right when we do our predicting lineup. I don't think we've ever. Well, I've never got a team lineup correct during his time in charge, that's for sure. But yeah, some people saying that they had the bang on team yesterday morning, which isn't good. So we hope that gets nipped in the bud. Right, moving on to today's big event, of course, the AGM. OS19 says, will it be available to watch at some point? I think usually Rangers do release it on their channel at some point later on. Chris will be in attendance for us, folks, so he will be updating us via our social media accounts, so keep your eyes peeled on that. He will also join me later as we discuss the big talking points from that as well. Someone asked what time it kicks off. I think it's 12 noon, if I'm not mistaken, Joshua.
12 noon, so we'll have, I think we will have a live blog going, which will be keeping people up to date, Derek, with all the big talking points as they arise, because obviously the mood will be better after a 6-0 win, but still I think a lot of, whether it be the losses or whether it be the situation that Rangers still do find themselves in, which I think is most likely out of a title race in December. There's still a lot of big issues that we'll see if they're raised, because you know what these AGMs are like. Sometimes there is big questions, sometimes there's not. But we'll have live blog covering all that. We'll have all the big lines coming out of the AGM. You'll be live with Chris after, and then Chris will round up the day with a bit of a reflective look back at the AGM later on. So loads and loads of coverage for people on the YouTube channel and the website as well. So just keep an eye on the app or the website, social media feeds, and we'll have all the big talking points covered from the Armadillo, I believe it's that again.
I would like to see a number of issues raised this and questions posed to the board. The Copeland stand being one, moving to Hampden, of course, and all that shambles around that. I would like to see sort of that addressed by the current board. Of course, the financials, I would like to see questions around that, where the future of the club behind the scenes, of course, still not got a chairman in place at this moment in time, with the news earlier on in the week that Malcolm offered. Those talks have stalled. So certainly a lot of pressing issues that need to be put to this current board. I hope that we get the answers we're looking for. More often than not, at these AGMs, we don't necessarily get clear and concise responses and answers. So we shall wait and see. But as Joshua said there, folks, Chris will be there for us. So we'll have you covered from the SECC Armadillo down there this afternoon. Right, we'll wrap up there for now. Big thank you to Joshua, as ever, for joining us. Much more cheery Rangers Review morning briefing. More of that, please. Built into Rangers last night. Thank you to you all for tuning in to the show, as ever. Just a reminder, if you are a regular, avid viewer of the morning briefing or the Rangers Review channel, and you've not yet subscribed, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell. You'll never miss a video when we go live. Right, if we don't speak to you later on, folks, enjoy the rest of your Thursday. Bye for now.